We've all had those moments that feel deeply unfair, but what happens when a small, everyday mistake is used as a weapon to destroy your life? Stay with me to hear the story of how one woman, with nothing to lose, fought back against the people who tried to take everything. "Are you blind?" the blonde woman shrieked, her voice echoing in the vast parking lot. "Look what you've done to my car." Sarah's eyes darted from the woman's furious face to the side of the black Range Rover. There, just above the rear wheel well, was a faint silvery line, no longer than her index finger. It was a scratch, certainly, but it was minuscule. Her shopping cart, overloaded with groceries and a wriggling 5-year-old, had drifted just a few inches as she tried to navigate it around the oversized vehicle that was parked halfway over the white line. "I'm so sorry," Sarah stammered, her hands trembling. "My cart just got away from me for a second. Let me get my insurance information and we can handle this." The woman let out a short, barking laugh. "Insurance? Honey, your $10 a month insurance policy isn't going to cover a custom repaint on a $100,000 vehicle. This isn't some beat-up minivan like yours." She gestured dismissively toward Sarah's decade-old Dodge Caravan, parked 3 spots down. The man in the suit, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was low and heavy, a stark contrast to his wife's shrillness. "My name is Arthur Chadwick. This is my wife, Eleanor. We won't be needing your insurance." He pulled out a sleek black phone. "We will, however, be needing a police report and the name of your lawyer." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Lawyer? It's just a scratch. I'm happy to pay for the repair out of pocket if I can." Arthur Chadwick almost smiled. It was not a kind expression. "The damage, my dear, is not just the scratch. It's the diminished value of the vehicle. This is a collector's edition. You've just cost us more than you probably make in a year." Leo's crying grew louder, and Sarah reached back to soothe him, but Mr. Chadwick's hand was still on her shoulder, a firm, immovable weight. She felt trapped, judged, and utterly powerless. The police arrived 20 minutes later. The Chadwicks were calm, articulate, and confident. They presented their story of a reckless woman who slammed her cart into their car with careless abandon. Sarah, flustered and trying to comfort her crying child, stumbled over her words. She tried to point out how small the scratch was, but the officer just nodded patiently and wrote down the Chadwicks' version of events. By the time the police left, Sarah was left with a slip of paper and a churning sense of dread. For 2 weeks, she heard nothing. The dread slowly faded, replaced by a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they had realized how ridiculous the situation was and had decided to let it go. That hope was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when a courier delivered a thick envelope to her apartment. It wasn't from an insurance company. It was from Blackwood and Finch, one of the most expensive and ruthless law firms in the city. The letter informed her that Mr. and Mrs. Chadwick were suing her for damages totaling $75,000. Sarah read the number again, then a third time. It didn't seem real. It was more than double her annual salary as a receptionist at a local dental clinic. It was a life-ruining amount of money. She sank onto her worn-out sofa, the crisp, expensive paper crinkling in her hand. They weren't just asking for a repair. They were trying to end her. That night, after putting Leo to bed, she sat in the dark for hours, feeling the walls of her small apartment closing in. She saw her future evaporating. The savings she'd scraped together, the roof over her son's head, the fragile stability she had fought so hard to build as a single mother. It was all about to be wiped out by a tiny scratch and 2 people who had more money than humanity. In a fit of desperation, she called the one person she could think of, her old college friend, Maya. They hadn't talked in over a year, but Sarah remembered that Maya had gone on to become a paralegal. Maya picked up on the third ring, her voice warm and familiar. Sarah explained the situation, her own voice cracking with unshed tears. Maya was silent for a long moment after Sarah finished. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold with fury. "They're not suing you for the money, Sarah. This is a sport for people like them. It's called legal bullying. They're going to bury you in paperwork and fees until you're forced to declare bankruptcy. They want to watch you break." "Then what do I do?" Sarah whispered. "I can't afford a lawyer to fight Blackwood and Finch." You don't need to, Maya said, a new determination in her tone. You have me. I'll help you with the paperwork. I'll guide you through the responses. We're going to fight them, Sarah. Pro bono. We're going to make them regret they ever met you. For the first time since that horrible afternoon in the parking lot, a tiny flicker of hope ignited in Sarah's chest. The next few months were a brutal education in the justice system. Maya was right. The Chadwicks' lawyers were relentless. They filed motion after motion, demanding financial records, employment history, even records of Leo's preschool attendance. Each one required a formal, legally sound response, which Maya would help Sarah draft late into the night after her own long day at work. Their first small victory came when Maya, scouring the internet for information on the Chadwicks, found a social media post from Eleanor Chadwick. It was a picture of her posing next to the Range Rover at a charity gala, dated 1 week before the parking lot incident. If you zoomed in, you could just make out a tiny scuff mark on the exact same panel where the cart had hit. It wasn't definitive proof of anything, but it was an inconsistency. It showed the car wasn't in pristine condition, as they claimed in their official complaint. It was a small crack in their perfect story. But just as they started to feel a glimmer of momentum, the Chadwicks struck back, harder. Their lawyers filed an emergency motion to place a lien on Sarah's assets, arguing she was a flight risk who might hide her money. It was a lie, but a well-argued one. A judge, buried in cases and seeing a high-powered law firm on one side and a self-represented defendant on the other, granted it. Sarah found out when her debit card was declined at the grocery store. A call to the bank confirmed her worst fears. Her checking and savings accounts, containing a meager $3,000 she had saved over 5 years, were frozen. That was the day she truly broke. She received an eviction notice a week later. The pressure was too much. She called Maya, sobbing. "I can't do this anymore," she cried. "They've won. I'll declare bankruptcy. I'll give them whatever they want. I just want it to be over. I can't lose our home." Maya listened patiently until the sobs subsided. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was not soft or sympathetic. It was hard as steel. "Listen to me, Sarah. This is the moment they were waiting for. This is the point of the whole exercise. They put a gun to your head so you'd agree that you're the one at fault. If you give up now, you're telling them that this works, that they can crush anyone who gets in their way. Is that the lesson you want to teach your son?" The words hit Sarah harder than any legal notice. She thought of Leo, his small face full of fear in that parking lot. What would he think of a mother who simply gave up? "No," Sarah said, her voice quiet but firm. "No, it's not." "Good," Maya replied, "because I have one last idea. It's a Hail Mary, but it's all we've got. We are going to subpoena the original high-resolution security footage from the supermarket's corporate servers." The final court date was set for a cold morning in November, nearly a full year after the incident. They had managed to win the motion for the subpoena, and a digital file had been delivered to the court. Sarah felt sick with nerves as she sat beside Maya's boss, a kind older lawyer who had agreed to represent her for the final hearing after hearing the story from Maya. Across the room, the Chadwicks sat looking bored and annoyed, as if the whole proceeding was a waste of their valuable time. Their lawyer presented the case first, showing glossy, large-print photos of the damage. In the pictures, the small scratch was now a deep, jagged gouge, nearly a foot long, surrounded by chipped paint. The repair bill was, as promised, enormous. Then, it was their turn. "Your Honor," their lawyer said calmly, "we would like to play the security footage from the day of the incident, File Exhibit C." The courtroom lights dimmed, and the large screen flickered to life. The video was grainy, but the events were clear. It showed Sarah's cart drifting slowly and making a small, almost imperceptible contact with the Range Rover. Sarah held her breath. The video continued to play. It showed the confrontation, the pointing finger, the arrival of the police. It seemed to prove nothing new. A look of smug satisfaction crossed Arthur Chadwick's face. "But," their lawyer continued, "we also subpoenaed the footage from camera 7 at the far end of the lot, if we could play that now." The feed changed. This angle was different, partially obscured by a pillar, but it showed the same Range Rover about 10 minutes after the police had left. The Chadwicks got back in their car. but instead of leaving, they drove to a nearly empty section of the parking lot. The courtroom watched, confused. Then, the driver's side door opened. Arthur Chadwick got out, looked around, and walked to the back of his vehicle. He opened the trunk, rummaged inside for a moment, and pulled out an object. He walked back to the passenger side, knelt down, and deliberately, forcefully, dragged the object along the side of his own car. The movement was unmistakable. He was turning a tiny scratch into a major gouge. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Eleanor Chadwick's face went white. Arthur stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open in disbelief, as if he couldn't process that his actions had been captured. The judge, a woman with a stern but fair reputation, slowly took off her glasses. She looked at the Chadwicks, then at their lawyer, then at Sarah. The silence in the room was absolute. "Case dismissed," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "And I am referring this case, including all evidence of what I can only describe as blatant, malicious fraud and perjury, to the district attorney's office. I expect criminal charges to be filed against Mr. and Mrs. Chadwick immediately." The aftermath was a whirlwind. Sarah didn't just win. She triumphed. She countersued the Chadwicks for malicious prosecution, and they settled out of court for a sum that was enough to secure her and Leo's future completely. The story hit the local news, and the Chadwicks became symbols of arrogant wealth gone wrong. But for Sarah, it was never about the money. It was about the principle. A year after her victory, she sat in a small office, the sign on the door reading "The Fair Fight Fund." Across the desk from her sat a young man, a landscaper, who was being sued by a wealthy client for allegedly damaging an antique statue. The fear and hopelessness in his eyes were achingly familiar. Sarah leaned forward, a gentle but resolute smile on her face. "I know you're scared," she began, her voice steady and sure. "They count on you being scared. They want you to break. Let's not let them." The Chadwicks believed their wealth made them untouchable, allowing them to bully anyone they saw as beneath them. Sarah's story shows that justice can prevail, but it often requires incredible courage. At what point do you think the risk of fighting back becomes too great? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story about standing up to injustice resonated with you, consider sharing it. You never know who might need to hear that even the most daunting battles can be won. Thanks for listening.